Welcome back to Fox 5's On the Hill Live this Sunday morning. We want to turn now to the growing opioid epidemic, and we do mean growing. More than 80,000 Americans died in the last year from overdoses. That crisis has touched so many lives across this country. And this morning we want to welcome Jessica Aber. She is the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, and her office is focused now on cracking down on fake fentanyl pills, amongst other issues. U.S. Attorney, thank you for being with us. This is a story that this television station has followed for years now, and it does not seem to be going away. We did hear less about it during the pandemic, but the pandemic national emergency has ended now. Are you seeing as well this roaring back of fentanyl right now, and what is fueling this?
Well, thank you, Tom, for having me, because this is a really important topic for everyone to be thinking about in this day and age. It is, we believe, the greatest public health and public safety crisis of our time for our nation and for the Department of Justice. And so we at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia, which is an office of federal prosecutors across the eastern half of the state, are doing our level best in the three areas that we can. It's prevention, it's enforcement, and it's treatment.
There was a time in this country where maybe drug dealers wanted to keep their customers on the hook so they continued to be regular customers. That's out the window now when you're talking about fentanyl. They don't care if these people die, do they?
It is true, unfortunately. The dealers of fentanyl don't care, and that's why we look at large criminal organizations and local dealers of huge quantities to prosecute and enforce these laws as best we can.
There's a big debate now politically, and I know you're not into politics, but it is important to kind of focus on where this is coming from. Is it coming over the border, or is it coming from our ports? Do we know where it's coming from?
Well, I have to say, Tom, we do know these are transnational organizations outside of the United States who are flooding the market with cheap synthetic ingredients to make the pressed pills that have fentanyl in them that kill our children. And they, in turn, are distributing the chemicals to U.S.-based gangs, U.S.-based large-scale dealers to flood into our communities.
And I want to talk about that nexus for a moment there, because we have in the past tended to talk about gangs and talk about these cartels as if they were separate entities. You're finding now that that's not really the case, that there is some linkage here between these two groups.
There is some linkage, and unfortunately that is why we set our sights so high as prosecutors, in that we want to be going back to not the local dealer. We want to be working our way up to the largest organizations and largest dealers. What's
the biggest obstacle you're facing in trying to prosecute these cases and try to track down who these people are that are pushing this stuff?
I mean, frankly, Tom, the market is flooded with these prescription-looking pills, right? And that's part of why I wanted to come here on Memorial Day weekend, is to spread the word that the dealers have gotten so good at making pills that look like prescriptions that you might normally get into counterfeit pills. They look identical. They are marked the same. Only a chemist from the DEA would be able to discern the difference, because it's cheap to make them and really profitable.
And we have recently talked to emergency rooms in our area that have seen an incredible rise in young people, teenagers especially, winding up in emergency rooms and having to be treated with Narcan because they have OD'd on this stuff.
Right.
Do kids think that they're taking one thing when actually what they're getting is something very different and something very deadly?
That's exactly right. So kids, I think, at parties believe, oh, I'm just going to take an oxycodone, an oxy, or a Percocet, a perk, and they pass them along, and in truth, they are the pills, as I said, that contain not the actual prescription medication, but in fact some amount of fentanyl. And that's what the dealers, the larger organizations, have figured out, that they can market to look like a prescription medication, but it's got fentanyl in it, and they don't care that your kid is poisoned and dies.
In prosecuting these cases, have you determined any kind of linkage as far as getting these drug dealers to turn around and tell you who was supplying them?
I mean, that is always the hope of federal law enforcement, right? That we can work our way up, that we can have folks cooperate, see the light that their product killed people, and that they can try to redeem themselves by telling us where they got their pills. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Right now, there's a lot of school districts in the area that have sent out the message to their own student bodies that they're allowed to start bringing Narcan into the schools in order if they were to come upon somebody who was dealing with fentanyl overdose. Do you support that idea? And is Narcan something that we need to get out into the wider community if the prosecutions and the law enforcement end are struggling to keep this scourge out of our neighborhoods?
I mean, I don't see Narcan as a political issue. I see it like a defibrillator.
Defibrillator for heart attacks.
Yeah, that is in lots of corridors of office buildings across America. I mean, if it can save lives, especially our kids, I think it's worth having.
If you can talk to a parent, if you can talk to a kid, what's the number one thing you want them to know about these fentanyl-laced pills?
I want them to know, frankly, that they need to talk to their kids about pills. They need to explain to them in a really real way that pills do not discriminate based on what neighborhood you're from, what your background is, what the color of your skin is. The pill isn't safe unless it was prescribed to you.
And this is a thing that as much as you prosecute these cases and you move through it, really, a public message is an important component to fighting this scourge, because it's still, as long as the demand is there, the supply is going to be there.
Exactly right.
All right.
Exactly right.
One last thought as far as talking to kids about this. Do they understand that this is fatal? That you take one of these things and there's no second chance in this?
I hope they do, and that's part of our educational campaign. We have a program that goes into the schools that provides education to the middle school and high school kids about the dangers of opioid use. We're partnering with Fairfax County Public Schools right now, and the more we can get the word out, the better our chances are. Such
an important message, and it's brought tragedy to so many families across this country, so it's very, very important work, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to highlight the work that you and your office at the U.S. Attorney's Office is up to on this right now. Jessica Aber, we appreciate you coming on, joining us live this Sunday morning here on The Hill. And that's going to do it for this weekend. We want to remind you that coming up at